My name is Ville Sirviö and I'm the CEO of the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. We are a joint organization of Estonia, Finland and Iceland, and the countries are developing together digital government solutions and digital public infrastructure solutions, and our flagship product is X-Road Data Exchange Layer, which is deployed worldwide. X-Road is one of the world's oldest DPIs, which has been deployed globally, I guess, and it started in the late 1990s in Estonia and has been in production since 2001 already. And the aim of X-Road is to facilitate data exchange between information systems and between organizations. So with X-Road, the aim is to build a coherent data ecosystem for the society in which the public, private and other sectors can exchange data by using one access point component to technically join the ecosystem, and hence X-Road is reducing the need for integrations. And when there is less need for integrations between the information systems, it's faster and more effective and cost-effective to build new digital services. So that's the main business case of X-Road, reducing the need for connecting services again and again, and instead building a data ecosystem for exchanging data securely between the data exchange parties. And X-Road also provides additional value by ensuring the non-repudiation of the messages. It's logging all of the messaging, it provides encryption and so on and so on. So it has security measures built in, which is also increasing citizens' trust in the data exchange by the government and between different organizations. At its best, X-Road is providing a large ecosystem which includes both public and private organizations as data exchange parties. But if we think about how X-Road ecosystems are typically built, it's common that countries and organizations setting it up start with the core services which are needed most often in building new digital services. For example, it is common that you need citizen data from a population register. So you might also need, let's say, business data from the business register, or you might need some financial data of the companies or taxation data for both citizens and companies. So it's common approach with X-Roads to start with so-called core registries or base registries, which are essential for the society to operate digitally. And usually when you start growing the X-Road ecosystem, you are adding different types of services commonly used by the citizens and businesses. And that's maybe the rational approach into X-Road, that you start with those which are essential. Anyway, it doesn't set any limitations, so it should be an open ecosystem for any organization to join for providing services or consuming services. And there is always an operator for the X-Road ecosystem, which is responsible for the guidelines of the ecosystem, setting up certain rules and regulations on how the ecosystem can be joined and how it can be utilized by the organizations. Anyway, a typical example might be some new digital citizen service which is provided online, and it requires data from multiple sources. So it might include citizens' data from the population register. Then it might include data about citizens' vehicle. For example, if a citizen has a car and needs to do a registration, it might check your address data from one register, it might check some of your vehicle data from other register and so on. So you find multitude of use cases for X-Road, but the main business case is reducing the need for integrating again when you build new digital services. I think the origins of X-Road are in the setup of the Estonian digital society back in the 1990s, when much of the things we see today were still unknown. So the society was lacking some of the basic connectivity, like the public authorities did not have proper private networks at that time. And also, I think it was limited connectivity between information systems. So different public authorities were having their registries or databases from different domains which were not connected with each other. So connectivity was an issue, and also was the security of the data exchange and even data storage. There was a huge information leak in Estonia in the late 1990s, type of cybercrime of its time, and because of this cybercrime, I think many authorities woke up that okay, we have to do something, and that's how Estonia started building X-Roll for secure data exchange, and also building on the distributed model of data ownership, so that the data never resides in one location, but data is always stored in multiple information systems and databases around. So X-Roll provided means for secure data exchange in a distributed architecture. I think the biggest step for X-Roll's expansion into new countries was that it was made open source. Estonia was developing X-Roll already since 2001, but Finland joined the cooperation in 2014, I think it was. And that was the time when X-Roll 6 had been developed for some time, which also provided the capabilities for federating two X-Roll ecosystems with each other. So at the same time when Finland was joining the cooperation, the countries negotiated about the licensing model, and X-Roll became licensed under the MIT license, which is a very permissive open source license. And I think it was a game changer for X-Roll because it was clearly communicated that X-Roll is free and open source, and many countries noticed that okay, this is something we could use. Also, the example of Estonia and Finland in cooperating with X-Roll in its development and also in exchanging data between the countries through X-Roll, which started somewhere around 2018 and forward. I think it has also been an example for many. And countries which have multiple states and they want to facilitate data exchange and cooperation also within the country between the states, they have also seen the cooperation of Estonia and Finland as an example. So I think the few factors which have led to X-Roll's success have been first of all the open sourcing of X-Roll, secondly the cooperation of Estonia and Finland, but also the way how we have been developing X-Roll by NIIS since 2018. We have been investing a lot into quality, making X-Roll a better product. And I see it necessary for any DPI to succeed that it has to be developed into an excellent product. As long as it is only a solution, it doesn't actually fly. But once you make it a product, then the countries start notifying that this is something we can trust, because they want to get products which provide value and provide a solution for them in a reliable way, which have a good background. There is an organization or some identified developer, and in our case when it was the government of Estonia first, then Estonia and Finland, now Estonia, Finland and Iceland. That's contributing to X-Roll's reputation and how it is seen as a DPI, that the governments are backing it. I think these are some of the factors we have seen. And also I think lots of things come from X-Roll's history and roots, and also from NIIS as an organization. We call it NIIS, the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. So what we have been doing has been based on certain values of cooperation, of some transparency, sustainability. So I think these values also have contributed into X-Roll's success. I think our role has been essential for X-Roll because the development between Estonia and Finland was kind of joint development, but it was practically made in two different teams. So there was a team in Estonia developing and a team in Finland developing and working on one DPI in two countries, and then try to merge all of the deliverables. I think it has been challenging all the time. So when we got the joint organization to work on X-Roll, it made it much easier and more effective and also cost effective to develop X-Roll. I think our organization could be an example for some other countries or regions in the world in which there is a need for something similar, facilitating cooperation between the countries. And I must say, based on my experience with this institute, that actually when you have some joint organization for developing together or doing anything practical together in DPIs or software, it's much easier once you have a common basis. You have a kind of common ground for discussing, and you can facilitate events, and the people who work around the organization usually get to know each other better than they would if they just meet ad hoc or meet occasionally in some project. But when there is kind of permanent basis for cooperation, this kind of platform for cooperation like we are. I think it makes it much easier for the countries to actually cooperate. I would consider all of the X-Road use cases important, and I wouldn't like to name any that would be the most successful or more successful than other, because X-Road is not a solution which works in the same way in every country. Actually, every country deploying X-Road has their own plan, what they want to achieve, what are the priorities with X-Road, and how they want to deploy it. In some countries, it might be about finding a common way for data sharing, that actually you have kind of de facto standard locally which you are applying in all of your government data exchange or government to business data exchange. But in some countries it might be about enhancing security of the data exchange, that you have certain measures in place which are also unified. In some countries it might be kind of business value that X-Road is providing, reducing corruption even, providing evidence of the data exchange, adding value to the justice system by providing such evidence which can be used in court disputes. This is what X-Road provides. So the benefits of it differ. In some countries it might be monetary benefits, that you reduce the number of integrations. And this is the evident benefit which you always get, and it only should be measured and somehow understood, that how big is the benefit if we have an ecosystem of 500 services and we have reduced integrations between 1000 new digital services which are being built. Reducing integrations is always saving money, so the monetary value is one of the benefits. In this way, I think we can find so many different benefits from X-Road that I couldn't say which one would be the most successful deployment. But it's a fact that Estonia has been using X-Road for the longest time out of the user countries, and therefore Estonia's ecosystem is already possibly the largest one in the world. And this leads to the conclusion that the benefits Estonia has gained through the years might be bigger than with some others, but many are following, and this is the way how it goes with X-Road. I often correct a misunderstanding about X-Road, which is that X-Road is not enterprise service bus. X-Road is not just a data exchange tool. If you want to exchange data, you can integrate point to point. You can find plenty of solutions for data exchange. But what X-Road is about is building your data ecosystem between all of the participants throughout the society. And that's a totally different goal than just facilitating data exchange between the organizations. And this is something that should always be understood about X-Road. NIIS as an organization has actually never been directly part of any X-Road deployment, so surprisingly we don't have much experience in deploying it. Of course, we understand the steps, we discuss with the countries deploying X-Road, we get lots of feedback and we hear about what has gone well and what has not. Anyway, we are not experts in deploying X-Road. As its developer, we understand the user needs and we work solely on the software development. However, we are aware of how X-Road has been developed throughout the years, even before us, and we have noticed some aspects which are maybe worth sharing. One is the experience from Estonia that when you have a working data ecosystem, well, every software is getting old. And when you get more and more legacy, at some point you need to do large structural changes, or you need to change some of the code parts of the software. With X-Road, we have seen, for example, the need to change the protocol or the protocols of X-Road. And when such a major change happens, it means that the user organizations have lots of work to do to migrate into the new version. So with X-Road, one lesson is that you have to think about the DPI lifecycle and understand the total lifecycle cost, and also to prepare to invest for possible migrations and major changes what might come with the next versions of your software. This is one of the lessons we have got through the years. Secondly, one lesson is that when you build DPIs, you should not build the DPIs only based on your own ideas, your own code, your own contributions from your community, but it's more beneficial to look into already existing solutions and standards and try to build the solutions so that it's modular, you can change parts of the software, you can more easily adapt into new standards, and most importantly, that you follow the existing or emerging global standards as much as possible, aiming for a better interoperability. And this is something we have learned with X-Road. When it comes to the actual deployment projects, what I'm seeing quite often is that it's getting a technical project in which everything is approached technically rather than organizationally, which should be the case. So with X-Road, you are building actually the processes around it, how the different agencies, public authorities are facilitating data exchange, what kind of onboarding processes you have to the ecosystem, what is needed for data exchange, like what the organizations have to deal between them, agree on the usage of data, and so on and so on. So there are lots of processes which are quite non-technical that have to be taken into account, which leads to the conclusion that for a successful X-Road deployment, it's necessary to have a plan for change management. How do we address the human concerns about the change? And I always underline the need for a proper change management framework, which makes it easier to deploy this type of software. X-Road is developed by and between Estonia, Finland and Iceland under the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. And the model works so that we are a non-profit association under the Estonian Non-Profit Association law. And we get a membership fee annually from our member countries. And with the membership fee, we purchase development services from different vendors through a public procurement process. And this is the way how X-Road is developed. And then it's released for free as an open source for any country to deploy. And currently we have approximately 25 deployments of X-Road worldwide. Out of those deployments, 2 are private deployments by companies. Majority are deployments by governments to build a national or state level data ecosystem. And the largest areas with X-Road currently are the Latin American and Caribbean region. It's definitely the leading one. There's a huge increase coming in Africa based on the information I have so far. We are also seeing X-Road deployments in Asia, including, for example, the Cambodia data exchange, their project, which was awarded some open source recognition 2 years ago. So yeah, it's a globally deployed DPI, and we don't set any restrictions for its use. There is no license fee of any kind, fully free and fully open source digital public good. And as such, I believe X-Road will be still growing, and we also hope to see some growth in Europe in the forthcoming years, because currently we only have 3 governments from Europe using it, and we are still developing it in Europe. So hopefully some of the European governments would also join the efforts and maybe become members of NIIS and help develop X-Road further with us. There's one aspect which is worth mentioning about our role and the global expansion, that I'm quite often asked how could we become members of NIIS. Some countries are approaching us with this question. So we have aimed for finding member countries close to us from Europe for the very practical reason that we want to facilitate local workshops, face-to-face meetings with people. These kind of live events which we make are necessary for us, and if we try to grow the organization and for example go global with it, it would require a totally different type of an approach. And we currently have lots of benefits from the way how we are now operating, so I don't expect it to change unless our members want to decide otherwise. But the current reason for NIIS remaining Nordic or European at least is the practical reason that we want to ensure the quality of the cooperation, of the development, and that we are at least almost at the same time zones and able to meet regularly and work together with our members. Actually, there are many countries which have deployed X-Road without being in touch with us at all. We have heard of some deployments only afterwards that, okay, this country has now deployed X-Road and it has been really a surprise to us. To deploy X-Road, it's not necessary to be in touch with us. It's nice, it's appreciated, but it's not necessary. X-Road is free, and in the X-Road global website, you can find actually all of the necessary resources for deploying X-Road. Besides the source code, we have released all of the documentation in English. We have released additional developer resources. We have released a kind of playground for trying X-Road, a guidance on setting it up. There are plenty of useful resources for developers to get started. Besides that, we have a free X-Road Academy online. Anyone can take courses on X-Road or sustainable software development, which is our latest addition. So everything needed for deploying X-Road is actually publicly available. We also have released calculators for estimating the costs of X-Road ecosystem deployment and estimating the costs of setting up the access point component in each organization. We also have released emissions calculator for X-Road, by which it's possible to estimate the approximate emissions, CO2 emissions of an X-Road environment. So those calculators are also worth checking at the stage of planning setting up a DPI like X-Road. So that's what we provide. It's all available and it's all free. I think what is necessary in both the overall large architecture and what is necessary also in the system architectures is the modular approach. And I think digital public infrastructure should be modular. It should consist of the necessary building blocks by which the data exchange, by which all of the digitalization efforts can be facilitated. And if I try to summarize what I consider as core building blocks, I think it's necessary to have the identifiers needed for citizens and for businesses and for all types of organizations. So we need to have some basis for a digital identity, a proper digital identity. And when we have the digital identity, then we need data exchange. And then when we have those two elements in place, it is much easier to build digital services. So modular approach put in the right order, that we start from the fundamental ones like having data exchange and having the digital identity. That's what allows us to build new things. Also, when it comes to data exchange, I personally are more in the favor of having domain agnostic data exchange like X-Road, which allows you to utilize the same data exchange infrastructure in all of your different domains of activity. Having such DPIs which provide data exchange as built-in part of some business process, those are good for certain business processes, but I think it's kind of waste of resources of building multiple times solutions for the same purpose. So I think it's good to think about it as layers, that you have the fundamental layers of having the digital identity, having the data exchange, finally building services on top of that. And of course, at the bottom we have the real digital infrastructure, which is going closer to hardware and so on, and cloud services and whatever. But yeah, from data exchange to services, I think it is best to keep the modular approach in building that. Well, X-Road as a solution is quite domain and sector agnostic, so it doesn't matter in which sector you are using it. But those who benefit a lot from X-Road are organizations which are producing and consuming plenty of services. So when they need lots of data sources or they provide different services digitally, in that case, when they have X-Road, they have their one access point for the ecosystem and they can benefit a lot from this type of data exchange. So I wouldn't say it's any kind of domain specific thing. It's rather like It depends on what kind of digital services you want to produce and consume, and the more you have activity, the more you benefit of X-Road. This is the way how it goes. But if we think about some X-Road characteristics which could provide some additional value for specific domains, well, I would pick a few examples. First of all, the secure data exchange which X-Road provides, that you really get evidence, you get logging data, you get encryption, you get all kind of security aspects done with X-Road. I think it's adding some confidence to data exchange in such fields where you need to ensure the confidentiality and the security of the data exchange, for example, the healthcare. Also, by some public authorities which are working in some bit more confidential fields, X-Road still can be considered safe. I think those are mainly like X-Road characteristics, not domain-specific characteristics, but supporting specific domains like healthcare is something that I could imagine. On the other hand, there is a controversy that we are often asked about X-Road and healthcare and how those two are connected, and if X-Road is a solution for the healthcare sector. But healthcare sector again is having its own standards in data exchange, interoperability, and all kind of digital services and software being built for the healthcare. So it's a very standard sensitive field, and getting to work with healthcare requires a lot from software vendors, and X-Road again is agnostic, so we don't have any healthcare specific certifications for the software. We don't follow any of the healthcare standards directly, so that makes it a bit tricky. Fitting X-Road with a specific domain or sector, it's not a very easy task. But I believe personally that X-Road could be utilized increasingly if its possibilities were fully recognized in some of the domains which are currently maybe even underusing it. For the decision makers, my first message is please do not build it yourself. The world is full of solutions and you just have to find those. If you really don't find, that's good, then you have something to develop, and please then also ask other countries to join the effort and don't do it alone, because everything you do in cooperation with others is saving money. So cooperating in developing is necessary, reusing is the best option. The second thing I would say is to consider the full life cycle and the continuous operations of the software or the DPI. We have seen some examples when there have been projects in some of the low and middle income countries in which international organizations have been funding deployment of a DPI. But deployment is a small part of the life cycle. And my message is, please ensure the full life cycle of the DPI. Ensure that you have plans and you have budgeting mechanisms which are supporting the continuous operation of the DPI safely. That's maybe the essential thing, to keep the DPI safe and secure for the society. One of the learnings with X-Road which I would like to share is the power of cooperation, which we have been discussing. So working together on a DPI is really beneficial. Other learning I have is that when we live in the world of news, internet, social media, marketing taking an active role also in the digital world, I mean all the DPIs even having strong efforts for getting visibility. The X-Road story has become popular and everyone knows somehow X-Road. The name is well known, to be honest. But it's very few people who really know in detail about X-Road and go to the sources and really make some X-Road academic courses and get to understand how this DPI actually works. So I also recommend everyone to look critically into all of the DPIs and solutions and make a difference between what is the marketing part and what is the reality. This is a thing which is evidently happening, and it's very difficult to avoid it because information is copied from multiple sources and we hear all kind of stories of different digital solutions and DPIs, but going into the very roots of what is it about, what type of a software is it, what it really requires to work on it, and much of this information is always available, but well, we have been doing lots of myth busting with X. 'Road. We currently have a core team for developing X-Road, which is through a public procurement, and the core team consists of 7 developers for X-Road. So 7 developers are funded by our members, and the team is coordinated by NIIS internally. So we have our own chief technology officer and software development manager who are running the planning and development of X-Road as a product. We have a steering committee for X-Road in which our members are deciding on its roadmap, on its budget, what kind of efforts will be taken the next year. This is how it runs, but we also want to engage the community. So we also have a community expert group which is open for anyone who wants to have a say about X-Road. And the community expert group is similar to our X-Road technical committee, so the topics are often quite the same. They are handling similar technical details about X-Road, and we really want to get the community voice heard. When we think about the wider community around X-Road, we currently have some 4,000 people in the X-Road open source community, I think from over 150 countries currently. But still, the contributions to X-Road are minimal. We don't get contributions because X-Road is a complex DPI system, and developing a complex DPI system differs quite a lot from developing some, let's say, basic digital service product which would be closer to the consumers or citizens or those individuals who really are using that software and might have more things to say about it. But when X-Road is kind of invisible solution for the citizens, for the end users, it's a very few people who have time and need and resources to actually contribute to X-Road, and this is a challenge. Some of the open source projects I'm talking with have the challenge of getting people to participate because they really develop it together by having volunteers building up software. In our case, we have a strong backup from the governments who are funding the development for common good, and I think this is an important thing about X-Road. But still, it is true that we have a bit easier situation when it comes to funding the core development, that it's already secured that we have a funding for the core development team. Still, it doesn't mean that it will be easy. We have a long list of things to do. We are currently building the next major version of X-Road, and for that we need both developers, we need the community to have a say, we need our own stakeholders from our member countries, the organizations running X-Road ecosystems and so on. So it really involves lots of different organizations and individuals. Besides what I already mentioned, we also have X-Road Technology Partner Program, which is open for companies, and any company which has some experience in connecting services in X-Road ecosystem or deploying X-Road or contributing to X-Road development, they are welcome to join the program for free. And what it means for them is that we provide visibility through the X-Road website to every company that has X-Road experience, and we also help countries to find resources for their X-Road deployment operations and even training on how to set up and how to operate X-Road. So this is how we work with the different stakeholders, and of course we also need to discuss with some other stakeholders like the European Commission in Europe and understand what are the data exchange plans. We need to be active in some international organizations like GaiaX and others who are building data spaces. The data spaces as a new thing emerging in data exchange has been a significant thing, and we have lots of different stakeholders from the organizations which are active in the development of data spaces in Europe and globally. My hope and vision for the future of DPIs and also X-Road is that we gain some global agreement upon how digital public infrastructure is built, how it's operated, how every question about the DPIs is addressed in a common way. And for that purpose, I find it important that the United Nations has been working on the DPI safeguards to set up a framework which is supporting governments worldwide to deploy DPIs in a sustainable way. And this is a project I have also been participating in and learning a lot of new things. and getting a better understanding on what is actually needed. And I must say that there is much more needed than we usually see. And getting to understand that through the DPI safeguards is really important for anyone working with the DPI, so I recommend checking that project. So I hope we will have a sustainable and safe future with DPIs worldwide.